Hello, welcome to the Charity Impact Podcast, where we aim to help you increase your charity's income and impact by sharing the experience and expertise of our guests. I'm Alex Blake, your podcast host, and I'm joined today by Howard Lake, founder of UK Fundraising, the news and community site for professional charity fundraisers, established way back in 1994. So it's a site I've been using myself for many, many years. And the company also provides digital fundraising consultancy and a great series of live online training courses. Howard's kindly offered our listeners a 15% discount for all of those courses. So you just use the code KEDAPOD15, all one word, when you're checking out. I'll put the details on the website as well, though, because I know it's a bit tricky to follow sometimes on the audio. So the courses are typically 90 minutes, delivered by experienced trainers. They're packed with practical advice, so delegates leave with ideas and actions to implement and test straight away. And the courses include a range of fundraising topics, including gift aid, starting a major donor campaign, creating images and video for greater impact, how to fundraise online on a shoestring, and more. There's new courses coming this year, including how to move from fundraiser to CEO and recruiting and retaining fundraisers. So there's a good mix there, depending on what your fundraising training needs are. So as I said, I'll put the link to the website on the webpage for this episode, and also that discount code, which was KEDAPOD15. So that's for 15% discount. And I'll stick it in the show notes as well, so you can just click through straight from your podcast app. And today we're going to be discussing Howard's latest venture, which is GivingX, which has the ambitious aim of growing giving on a massive scale. So welcome to the podcast, Howard.
Thank you very much, Alex.
How did I do with the intro? Was I accurate?
Absolutely, yes, spot on. So very good stuff. Thank you.
Good. So GivingX, where did this idea come from? What's the sort of background to it?
It kind of dawned on me, and as it has with others, but probably about sort of 4 or 5 years ago, having been in the early days of digital fundraising, I really hoped then that was going to transform giving, level the playing field. We would all have access to all these fabulous tools. This was 1994 when I set up UK Fundraising. So even back in about 92, 93, when I first started this research, I thought, brilliant. I have no idea how it's going to change, but I know it will change fundraising hugely. 30 years on, have we managed to grow giving? Probably not. If you look in the UK and the US, the average household income, or based on the average household's donations, they're not going up. They've pretty much plateaued for at least the last 10 years. And it's a frighteningly narrow number of people that actually give to charity that sustain most charities. So that is rather galling after thinking that digital was going to solve many of our problems. So I started looking around. Who else is looking at growing giving? And not growing giving for the bigger charities, growing giving that lifts all charities. And I accept that's a really naive question. Where can we all get more money? Everyone wants to know that. But I really couldn't find many people focusing on it. There was lots of efforts focusing on particular channels. How can we enhance this? So I set up GivingX about four years ago, originally in its original form. So pre-COVID. And one of the plans to do that was to find maybe 1 or 2 organizations or groups or individuals that had a plan, not just a plan, but a product that could generate a massive source of new and sustainable income. And the big reveal is I've not found anyone in 5 years. There's 1 or 2 exceptions, which I'm happy to explain. But maybe that's because I am asking the wrong question. But it's a question I'm prepared to ask because I really would like to retire thinking we really have explored every possible opportunity and also not missed any. That's my other concern with fundraising. Have we stuck in our safer, reliable channels and approaches, or have we missed something potentially very big?
Yeah. And I guess this is looking at it as a sector issue rather than any one organisation, isn't it? So do you think those ideas, what sort of individuals or organisations do you think they might come from? Do you think it might be some of the sort of leading fundraising charities, or do you think it's more like tech entrepreneurs or, that sort of thing?
That's a really good question, because I think it's not just the charity sector. The charity sector is being emulated by so many other organizations and individuals. So apart from social enterprises. There are many businesses now that effectively that claim to have a social impact and deliver. So there's a huge blurring. So I'm not, right from the beginning, going to focus just on charities. My guess is the solution, or what solutions, will come from outside the sector. Could be wrong, but I'm trying to be as agnostic as possible. I suspect when I see the plan, the product, that I probably will recognize it, or I hope I will, or others will.
And just going back to your point around the sort of giving trends, I guess the headline is that, as you say, it's just not grown. It's certainly not grown in line with inflation over the years. So what are some of the sort of key trends, do you think, that we need to be aware of, or that kind of relate to this?
I think it's more the trends in need, and on the assumption that more need is going to cost more money. Where's that money coming from? And if you would just look at climate crisis, let's not take into account all other things, sort of post-COVID recovery, mental health issues and challenges. Where's the money going to come from? I have no solution to that, and I know lots of other people are asking this, but we need a substantial source or sources or methods of new income, probably just to maintain our position at the moment, which is not enough.
And do you get a sense of why? It's a difficult question, but maybe you have some thoughts on it. Why isn't giving growing, and why is it that, there's such a proportion of people that just aren't giving at all? Have a sense of what those reasons might be?
There are a whole lot of better researchers than me that look into this and actually have the data on it. It's a mixture of misunderstanding charity, and there are plenty of people that benefit and rely on charitable services but don't give. And fine, that's their right not to give. But so there's a misunderstanding of charity. There is obviously financial challenges, but until very recently, all the research seemed to point to the fact that income did go up in crises. Okay, we've not had 3 back-to-back mega crises or perma crisis than currently. I think it's a lot of different reasons. That's why it is so hard to tackle. It's not just one thing to fix. It's a mixture of all kinds of things: trust and confidence, obviously political background, culture wars, and so on. But many, many more things. And also, happy to say, fundraising sector as a whole, and I am one of those. I've been in the sector for over 30 years. Maybe we could have done things better. Maybe we haven't understood donors' needs, donors' motivations as much as we could and should. So it's a horribly complicated
there's a lot of stuff there, isn't there? Yeah. You mentioned you've been looking at this idea, and you set up GivingX 4 or 5 years ago. You mentioned there were a couple of exceptions. What are those exceptions that you've come across so far?
I mean, I've looked at all kinds of different ways of where this activity might happen. Obviously, some of them are going to be private. There could be businesses working on such a thing, and we don't hear about it until it launches. There was one very good incentive prize, which has run for the last 2 years, which I saw, which had a global focus. It focused on some of the larger NGOs and their fundraising problems. So in that sense, it wasn't encompassing everything. But one or two good products have certainly come out of that. So incentive prizes like the X Prize, and even the prize that went back to Lindbergh flying the Atlantic, that might be one way to inspire giving.
And for people that don't know, what's the X Prize?
The X Prize is a series of prizes that's designed to inspire sudden rapid development towards a particular goal. So they cover a wide variety of things. So it can be medical, it can be environmental. So yes, have a look at X Prize. They've been going for quite a while, and they have quite a range of social good activities. And they know that the X Prize can also, as well as there being one winner, one of the benefits of an incentive prize is lots of people are working to the same goal, and it has to be a very clearly stated goal. And the benefit of that is that you get this group of like-minded people. Not all can win, but the chances are there is this group of people who've all shared the experience of trying to win and may then attract other funding or go on to do other activities. So yes, I'm a fan of incentive prizes.
And it's a huge sum, isn't it, that the winner gets? I can't remember if it's like $1 billion or 100 million, or it's really significant.
Yeah, they are all quite different depending on what the project is and who's funding it. There are usually major donors behind the funding. So yes, that's one approach. But the one that focused on philanthropy was a separate prize set up from within the charity sector.
Do you remember some of the what the winning idea was, or some of the ideas that you saw on that one?
One of them last year was actually growing the number of people that can fundraise, that are trained in fundraising. So it was a global view. What I will do is I will dig out a link and share it with you so it can go in the notes to this. But yes, so in a way, not necessarily advanced. The world needs better fundraisers and more of them. That's definitely one opportunity. And that's what won the prize last year.
Yeah, it's difficult to think of what the sort of winning idea could be, I think, for me at least anyway. Maybe I'm not that imaginative, but yeah, whether it's, I suppose, something like that feels like, I suppose if you do it on a huge scale, then it's a big thing, but it feels more of a sort of incremental improvement rather than like, here's the big, huge new idea that transforms things. And maybe that's fine. Maybe you just need some significant initiatives that move things forward rather than necessarily a big, bright, shiny tech thing that's...
Absolutely. And I'm the first to admit it's not going to be a big, bright, shiny tech thing, because that really probably would have been discovered by now. I mean, if it is fabulous, I have no problem with that. But it's not. It's going to be something quite straightforward. And if it's got a scale, it's got to be quite straightforward. So, yes, no shining knights in shining white armor coming to our rescue. It's going to be small and practical, with the ability to scale effectively and sustainably. Easier said than done. I agree.
Yeah. What have you learned so far from the sort of research and conversations that you've been doing? Who are the people working on growing giving overall? Have you been able to identify who some of the kind of key players are, if there are any on that?
There are. I think people approaching it from so many different ways, which is healthy. That will uncover some benefits. And as you say, if they're incremental, so be it. That's it. Or my only concern is what I'm trying to focus on is something that brings about change quickly on the grounds that we don't have 50 years, 100 years to grow giving on a scale, because we will be ever further behind in meeting need. So, I mean, there's also kinds of fabulous rethinking philanthropy going on. There's the Beacon Fellowship, who churn out huge amounts of really useful research and reports.
And their focus is on growing high-level philanthropy, really, isn't it? Major giving.
It is, yeah, which is absolutely one thing, stick with what we know, a major source that can apply to all organizations. Almost any organization may well attract a major donor. Activity within the grant-making sector, how can they be better grant makers? How can they make it more just and fair on a global scale to support other grant makers in other countries as well? So yes, there's lots going on. Some of it may not have the focus of trying to grow giving. It may just be to improve the quality and the effectiveness, which is fine. But yes, it's who is growing giving on a massive scale and who's working on it now. That's, to put it bluntly, my focus. And yes, I've not yet found it, but I keep asking and talking to people. So who knows? Maybe someone listening to this podcast will be working on just a solution.
Yeah, I think, as you say, there are lots of people taking different approaches and, kind of working in one way or another to try and, I suppose, lots of them are maybe more about improving what we currently do rather than necessarily thinking about that sort of really scaling at a transformational level or, significantly increasing the amount. Like, as you say, a lot of the stuff in the grant making sector is about improving how people do things, improving the processes, which I think there is a net financial gain there, but it's not like, 10x in the amount of money that's going out.
It could also be unblocking as well. We know there are blockages and we've regularly encountered them over my 30 years. I remember when all charities had to pay VAT on donations via text, via SMS. So that was a battle worth winning. Same with gift aid. We hear each year how much gift aid is being left unclaimed for all kinds of reasons. So is it that? Is it effectively a number of blockages together? If we could fix those, which may at a certain level involve legislation, which obviously complicates it. So yes, it could be just an unblocking of a known problem that has not yet been tackled. So many different angles. I put quite a few of these together. So I did write a white paper on this back in 2019. So again, I'll share the link to that. So there are about 7 or 8 different possibilities that I suggested where this kind of activity might happen. And the other one is kind of luck, serendipity. It could well be a fintech, financial technology product, not built for giving, but actually which you or I or someone else in the sector would look at and think, wow, that's very close to being a new source of giving or a new source of income with some tweaks and so on.
Yeah, it's such an interesting challenge, isn't it? Because there are, I suppose, any of those sort of tech solutions, I think, are primarily going to be about making it easier for people to give. It's about that sort of, making it easier to, whether it's kind of coming out of your payroll or whether it's, having a really cool app that kind of gives some kind of incentive and motivation and is really easy to use. There's a really good one from the UN World Food Programme called something like Share the Meal.
Yes.
Came across it on Alberto Ligi's podcast. He had the guy on. That's really cool in that you can kind of choose where you're donating, and it has this kind of stories, and then has the kind of the slider thing that kind of shows, you've bought this many meals, and it's kind of, really low price points. I think, there's stuff like that feels like it already exists. There's probably not as much of that stuff as you might think would be useful to have. And there are obviously lots of, things like Just Giving that have been around for ages, which is much easier than doing the old paper sponsorship forms and things.
Yes.
Like that stuff. So I don't particularly see where the tech side comes in. It's almost like, it seems like the problem is something around convincing more people to give, or, people to give. I suppose it's convincing more people to give, isn't it? Because actually, I think the people that already give are giving more. I think that's the sort of trend from the CAF's giving report, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's whether it's that sort of educational piece and it's difficult because when the mainstream media is quite negative towards the charity sector, when you have all these kind of hatchet jobs in the kind of mainstream places like the Telegraph and Times and things, and then the government also not necessarily being the most helpful for any sort of charitable philanthropic organisation to try and then, kind of win over the public when you're up against those kind of huge machines of media and government is quite a big ask, isn't it? So
it is.
I wonder how much of this government has a part to play in, both in terms of championing the sector and philanthropy, but also, as you said, some of that sort of regulatory stuff, like more tax incentives for giving, making gift aid easier and things like that.
Yeah, it might be that. Or taking the other view, stepping away, getting out of the way. I don't have an answer. But yes, you're right. It's almost, whatever it is, it's got to work for donors, for people. And it may be different. It may be different in each country. I accept that. So that's another challenge.
Yeah, I suppose I'm thinking very much from a UK perspective, but of course, globally, it will be very different again, won't it?
Yeah. So yes, it's in many ways a really, really daft question. Where can we all generate more income? but I'm happy to be the fool that stands up and asks it and see what comes of that. If nothing does, so be it. The question's been asked of a lot of people. But I hope somewhere we will come across a few people, very, very smart people, building something that can try to address this rapidly.
Yeah. What were in that white paper? You mentioned there were 7 kind of ideas that you put forward. Are there any that we've not covered so far?
No, it was accepting that ideas may come from different sources. So traditionally, fundraising tends to have developed its own ideas, which includes copying from commercial sector. So direct marketing was such a big activity. Then in came telephone fundraising, and the sector applied its own approach to that. I think the sector is so broad now, or doing good for purpose, however you want to describe it, is now so not limited to charities. People can do it themselves. People can do it through other groups. People can buy products, whatever. I think you have to take a much, much broader view. So is it coming from the sector or is it coming from outside? My guess is outside, but I'm certainly not going to ignore the sector. And actually, none of this, incidentally, is criticizing fundraisers. Having been a fundraiser for all my life, I know how resilient, clever, sharp, effective they are, often against the odds. So it's not a critique except where some fundraising practices have been less than good.
Yeah, there's a mix, isn't there?
Yes.
Please excuse this brief interruption. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast and to ask a small favour. The whole point of the podcast is to help people working for social impact by sharing the experience and knowledge of our awesome guests. Please can you help by letting people know this free resource is worth a listen? A great way to do this is by taking a few seconds to give us a rating in your podcast player. You can just click the 5 stars and that would be amazing. Or if you could write a few words to say what you like about the show, that would be even better. The link ratethispodcast.com/charity will take you to the right place and show you how to do it. That link again is ratethispodcast.com/charity. If there isn't a rating option where you listen, you can always give us a shout out on social media. Thanks for listening. Okay. Is there anything else you would point people towards in terms of further reading around this? Or if people wanted to kind of explore the question further, where might you point them towards?
As a starter, because there wasn't much that I could find, I would suggest having a look at, so have a look at the white paper that I share. I think there are a few links to resources there, or certainly examples that people can have a look at. So obviously it hasn't been updated. It makes a reference to AI, and that's one area we haven't really covered, which, if you want scaling and low cost scaling, then AI is going to be part of it. That's almost a given. So otherwise you don't get global, rapid, low cost scale. So AI may well be it. I mean, that's kind of stating the very obvious 6 months after ChatGPT arrived. I think there've been enough fundraising companies working, sort of digital companies working on AI for years now. I mean, it's been the topic of conversations at conferences way before COVID, so it's not new. So anyway, other places to read. I'll try and think of a few other resources. I think the people behind X Prize, so Stephen Kotler and Peter Diamandis, I think some of their books quite interesting. Abundance, I think, and Bold, just different ideas of exponential, of living and working in exponential times with change happening at such a pace, and does give opportunities for new ways of thinking and doing, or at least testing them out.
Yeah, I heard Peter Diamandis talking on the Tim Ferriss show. Is really interesting, I think, and that's where I heard about the X Prize from originally.
Yes.
I think that was where I first heard it from. Yeah. But I mean, AI, is another interesting topic that we could kind of get into. I mean, it seems like, I suppose at the moment a lot of the debate is around like ChatGPT and stuff, isn't it? Because that's kind of what's in the public view the most, and what we've all been kind of playing around with, and it doesn't feel like it's particularly going to change the world, because it's like a lot of the content's crap, isn't it? It's kind of, it's the speed is amazing. It's great that it can kind of create this stuff really quickly, but I mean, the inaccuracies are worrying. But apart from that, it's just not very well written. If you ask it to draft some, I suppose it's seems to be that it works well. So I suppose it works well for, like, for example, with the podcast, I can get it to, there's a sort of podcast specific version of it. So it's good for like suggesting episode titles, maybe just doing the show notes, because it's kind of a very brief description of here are the things we talked about. But if you asked it to write a really insightful article about the topics we discussed, it doesn't give any depth. It's just kind of, they talked about this, and then they talked about this, and then they talked about this. So I don't know. I mean, obviously there's much kind of smarter AI stuff that's doing things that we're kind of not really talking about as much, which you'll know much more about than I do. But I don't know where, like, what the thing will be, the kind of the fundraising thing. I suppose AI, you can see how once the thing is there, it can turbocharge it, but I don't know what the thing is that it would be turbocharging.
Fair enough. I agree. I think ChatGPT and focusing on prompts and getting them right and what works for fundraising, I mean, that's a really, really good starter, because this time a year ago, most people had never heard of large language models and so on, or even thought, could it be relevant to me? So yes, that's a really good starter. But yes, I think the impact of AI in the charity sector is going to be, or is becoming, far greater than that. It's the number of people who are already using these tools because they could. You don't have to go on training courses, and they're free. Well, they were free back in December last year. I think if I had to pick one, I'd just say it's effectively the personal assistant version that effectively helps save you time. If we could save every fundraiser half a day a week, 1 day a week from the dull, repetitive, manual activities they do, what does that free us up for? 166,000 charities in England and Wales. Okay, most of them are voluntary, and there are many smaller ones. That's close. That's some people are already reporting saving substantial amounts of time.
It definitely does, doesn't it? It's then taking advantage of that time, isn't it? Because often there's the time's created, but then does it necessarily increase productivity? Because you don't see the kind of impact of it in that way.
No, I mean, it may lead in a different direction. It may lead to the 4-day week, because we can actually do 4 days work in 5, courtesy of a personal assistant. I would just focus on that. That's a direct benefit to all those sole fundraisers, particularly at small organizations or new organizations, who would just love to be able to recruit a person to help them, a second fundraiser. If you view it like that and work and look at the tools that can do that, which are being brought in anyway into all the tools we use every day, Microsoft and so on, and Google. That is transformational. And that might be it. That might be the best thing you can do. Make all fundraisers more effective and more efficient, so they have more time for more fundraising, or rather better fundraising.
Yeah, I think definitely all of those sole fundraisers out there at smaller organisations, there are lots of things where they can save time with those sorts of tools, because where you are doing a bit of everything, then, those sort of email subject lines or, Eventbrite descriptions, that, there's tons of stuff where you just got a little bit of a mental block, and you can speed up the process, definitely. Have you come across any sort of good examples of fundraisers using AI at the moment that are maybe go beyond saving time? Have you seen anything where people are finding ways to, in any way, kind of, I suppose, create whether it's new products or whether it's just, I suppose, just doing something other than using it as a way of saving time? So I'm just curious about how people are using it.
I will give you an example which doesn't quite answer that, but it's the one that got me onto ChatGPT about 5 hours after it was released. I saw a UK business person who had used, and it wasn't ChatGPT, but had used generative AI to help an individual who didn't have writing skills, but he'd set up his own gardening business. And he was really not very good at writing to prospective clients, or thanking prospective clients, or billing them. So what this guy did was just create this tool that took the poorly worded text of some of these messages and then just outputted it back into standard, business friendly text immediately. So the guy with a gardening business just didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to learn. He didn't have to go and find funding to go and get extra education or something. The tool changed his content and understood it accurately enough to let him run his own business. So I looked at that and thought, how many charities could benefit from something like that? You've got to be, obviously, there's all kinds of issues. If you're a medical charity or anything, there's many things you can't use it for. But that kind of standard basic level of being able to run a business, to generate the message, the text appropriately and convincingly, that opened my eyes to what was possible. And that was early morning on 1st of December, the day after ChatGPT launched.
It'd be interesting to see how things develop over the next however many, days
6
and weeks,
months,
perhaps,
in
the world
it is that time
of AI and stuff. But over the next year or so as well, because I think there are different directions it could go in the way it's got that potential that sort of exponential potential in terms of what's going to come, but also it has the potential to just regurgitate loads and loads of bland content, and and for it not to be used in clever ways but in lazy ways, and then that almost then I think on there was a good episode from Charity Digital on their podcast just recently talking about the content bots and saying, potentially, is it going to almost start cannibalizing its own kind of stuff? Because it's, it's kind of creating this kind of poor content that then people are going to be using for their blogs and things. And then when it goes and crawls to find answers to questions, it's going to be finding this stuff. And so it's almost like the content just gets worse and worse in this spiral.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a real concern. What does it base its content on and its understanding? Such that it has understanding.
Yeah. And of course, then it brings in all those questions of bias and things like that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, huge amounts. And you could argue that charities have to have a role in that. Now's the time. If you wait for 6 months, a year, not all charities, but definitely the charity sector needs to have a voice in that kind of regulation and governance. And there are people working on that, which is great.
I think I will stop us from doing a whole separate episode on AI.
Yes.
Maybe another time, but I'm probably not the best person to host that conversation by a long way. I think we'll probably wrap up there. So it's been all about giving X today. So listeners, if you have ideas on this, presumably Howard will love to hear from you. We'll share some links and further reading and stuff like that on the website so you can explore some of that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll share the link to those training courses with that discount code, those various different fundraising topics. I know there's a bunch of really good trainers there, so I definitely recommend checking those out. Howard, is there any final comment, request to the listeners, anything at all that you want to add at the end?
I would say do try and, if anyone has ever had an idea that can grow giving, I'd love to hear it. And as I said, I'm the one that's asking the daft, naive question. So don't worry. I would just love to hear your ideas. Maybe you stumbled on something or know someone who's working on it. I would love to hear anyone working on a product that has the ability to grow giving on a massive scale, not just for one charity, but for all.
Yeah, I mean, we should encourage people to just share stuff openly on social media when we get this episode out and we share the link to it. I will ask people to share any thoughts and ideas and things they've seen, because I suppose the benefit of that is that then other people see it and think, actually, and what about this? And it can get that conversation going a little bit, hopefully.
Yes.
But it's not an easy question to answer.
It's not. It's a very broad topic.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Howard. That was really, really interesting. And I hope that we do hear some good ideas from people. I'll be keen to keep listening, keep watching closely and see what comes from it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Charity Impact Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time and attention. I know how precious a resource time is. I hope you enjoyed the show. If I could trouble you for a further 2 minutes of your day, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a review on your podcast player via ratethispodcast.com/charity. You can engage with us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Just search Charity Impact Podcast, or search Charity Impact Podcast in your browser to find our website, where you can email me directly. And you can subscribe to our email list for the opportunity to submit questions for me to ask upcoming guests. You can also find all the show notes and the previous episodes and links to resources that our guests have recommended. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.